Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in, or good day if you're tuning in from China or farther away in the world. It's a wonderful pleasure for me to have this last opportunity to do the third webinar in the series. But of course, Tahira's final webinar will be on Thursday. And mine is talking about how to feel empowered really as a parent at a time when many people perhaps start to wonder about whether or not they have any power or opportunity as a parent. But the fact of the matter is, very often we underestimate the power of these personal connections, these connections that we have with our children. And those connections are really very great, and they're at the heart of every human being. I remember working with about 10 top executives to talk about having them figure out what their most important value was. And all of them agreed that it was their family. And it's very interesting that when people think that they might have done well in all the other areas of their life, but still the area of your family and making sure that you're good with your parents and your children is always the most important thing to us. And if it isn't, then we need to adjust our priorities, because it's only as the family is strong in a sense of unity that we really understand the value of each other, and we start to realize that our true riches come from our relationships, and that those relationships are the most important thing in our life. So without any further ado, we'll ask Taylor to put up the slides, and we'll go through them, and we'll look at some of the new research that has taken place. So I titled this, How Not to Under, do you want to move back, Taylor? Sorry. How Not to Underestimate Your Power as a Parent. Okay, go ahead, Taylor. Yeah. So rather than a parent believing they're not needed, they should realize that their wise guidance is necessary for their teen. Of course, we're focusing tonight's presentation on teens. The difference is children need you to lead them, whereas teens need to feel they are side by side with you, adult to adult. So in another way, we have to change our approach when we're dealing with teenagers, but it's still a very, very valued role. And when we learn to walk side by side with our teen, we can guide them well. Next. In the past, parents were told, stand back and let your teen work it out. But now the new research shows that you should stay close and be more emotionally connected. That you need to have a close relationship. And in order to stay close, you must be able to be talking together, having conversations together. If you feel like you don't know what to talk about, then asking a question is very valuable. Taking a learning mode is really important. But the research does show that each parent should stay close to their teen and be emotionally connected to what's going on with them. Next. A teen may need help with organizational skills. This is an area when they're younger teens, in their earliest teens, they really can be actually very confused. And part of that is developmental, that they can be spatially confused and confused in other ways. And it almost makes them look like they're not very, perhaps they're not very bright, or you might be worried about them. But that's really because of the stages that they're going through. So, there's lots of ways to help them organizationally prepare. Like, in other words, how do you prepare when you have a meeting? How do you prepare when you have an event? I could have used a few of those skills today because of what happened to me technologically a few minutes ago, but I thought I was prepared. And even with the best of preparations, things can go wrong. But one of the things, even with teenagers, reminders with sticky notes, different organizational things that can help are ways, rather than belittling them for their lack of preparation, helping them to see how they could. I remember my wife used to help my kids before the next day. She'd get them to put their clothes out on the floor, dressed as they would be the next day. So they'd kind of make a person on the floor that would look like they should look like the next day. And that way, in the mornings, we had 5 children. In the mornings, it wasn't total chaos because they weren't saying, "Where's my socks? Where's my shirt?" Everything was there in front of them. And she taught them that when they were just young, like 8 or 9. So it helped them actually figure out and get the concept of preparing what are they going to wear the next day. So it can be something as simple as what you're going to wear, but it can also be other types of preparation. Go ahead, Taylor. The biggest thing is for us to be able to stay positive and close to them and interested in what they're doing and affectionate. I remember Ellen saying once, children, youth sometimes want to be as completely sophisticated as adults and as a small child. And so, every person, no matter what our age, we need to feel like we're loved and that we can feel the affection of those that are important to us. And staying positive, even when you have doubts yourself about what's going on, is still really important. Why is that important? Because you're modeling good skills. It's easy to be calm and happy and all of the rest of it when there's no stressors. But when there's stressors and you can demonstrate a positive, interested, and affectionate attitude, that's really important. Next. You have to show a high degree of understanding with true empathy, but not pity. In other words, a statement of understanding should always precede a statement of advice. If you show that you can understand what is going on by what you talk about, then you connect emotionally with that person. And then when you advise them something, they feel like you understand them. And so there's a kind of closeness. And understanding will always bring about a better relationship. Parents that do this, research shows, in early teens have teenagers that have lower rates or no depression or anxiety disorders by mid-teenage years. And if you saw the first webinar, now anxiety is the #1 world mental health problem, and depression is the second. So, recognizing that parents that do stay close and show empathy and understanding to their teens really help them to avoid depression and anxiety in their future. Next. Studies also show that it takes them longer to recover from stress. And hormones, and this is talking about teenagers, and hormones that normally assist when one is stressed often have the opposite effect as they do with adults. So they respond poorly to stressors. That's why you get the slamming of doors sometimes and the walking out and the outbursts. They often will tell you to stay away from them, leave me alone. But don't believe them when they say that. They want parents to remain positive and show a good example of how to handle stress by assisting them. Now, sometimes you have to give them a bit of space and then show that you're ready to help them figure out how to go forward. That's good modeling on the part of a parent of how to help them through difficulties so that they themselves can think about those attitudes when they face difficulties and figure out how to plan. Of course, consultation together, being able to look at, well, how can we do this? Of course, when we ask that question together, remember, side by side with our team, how can we do this? How can we get through this? We're taking a kind of learning approach. I'm not saying I understand what you're going through. You might have been through a similar situation, but teenagers, like everyone else, don't like to believe that they're not going through unique difficulties. And they feel very stressed by them. So it's so important to them. Next. Show teens how to view difficulties as challenges and stay positive, helping them to turn their attitudes around. Research shows that the brain is so plastic at this time that the stress management habits they learn to use at this stage will stick with them for a very long time, in many cases for the rest of their life. So that's why it's really important for the adults in their life to be mature and to show that, yes, you're going through an extremely difficult time, but I have confidence in you and we're going to be able to, I can help you, and we can figure out how to do this together. Those kind of reaching out, cooperative, I need some assistance here, but let's work together. Problem solving skills are very, very valuable for lifelong skills. Next. Next. Friendship skills are also worth teaching. Keep communication open, positive, and exploratory with questions. Lots of times, parents feel they don't quite know how to connect with their children or how to collect them. And remember last week in Tahira's workshop, she mentioned that, you know, you want eye contact, you want to gather your children, you want to gather your youth. So this communication being open and positive is really important. But of course, sometimes the easier way for us to connect the best in a learning mode is to ask questions. So what's going on with this situation? What's happening? Tell me some of the dynamics of what's happening so I can understand how complex it is. You know, teenagers feel like they're going through very complex times and they don't know what to do, and it's all kind of mysterious. And if you walk in there like you know everything, then that kind of makes them feel diminished. So it has to be that you're going in to a complex situation, you're going to help understand it by listening, and you're going to help them sort it out. And when it comes to friendships, they need to be able to think about what kind of friends. A nice exercise to do is, if you're going to pick a friend, what kind of qualities would they have? Let's make a list of qualities so that we understand what do we value in friendships. And that way we're establishing some inner architecture so that they'll be able to figure out what a friend should look like. When a friend teaches you, treats you in a bad way, is that still a friend or is that a problem? Is that going to be a problem on an ongoing basis? Is that person there for you and are you there for them in difficulties? Not expecting an unrealistic kind of loyalty where it's loyalty even if you're doing something seriously wrong, but a loyalty that would help you come to be aware that maybe what you're doing isn't quite the way it should be. So good friendships with good friends are very important for adjustment. Go ahead. Next. At 15 and 16, normal fears are lessened and risk-taking behavior is more likely to happen. Their brain receptors are different at that stage. So they're looking for more thrilling experiences, more upbeat experiences. What's interesting about what minimalizes risk-taking behavior, which is something that parents want to do, and also youth should do, are positive peers have been linked to a reduction in risk-taking behavior. So if they have positive peers that have good attitudes and are thoughtful, when they're together, they take less risks. They really are able to help each other understand things in a better way and be safer. Teens that are closer to the parents at age 15 and 16 take less risks. So another major reason why you want to make sure you're staying close is because you want your 15 and 16-year-old to not be taking risks. And I'm not saying that every 15 and 16-year-old wouldn't take risks if their parents were closer. That's not true, because there could be extenuating circumstances, there could be trauma, there could be mood disorders, there could be lots of things that might cause youth to take risks. But what we're trying to do here is minimize them. So parents need to keep close. And of course, by keeping close, you'll become aware of the difficulties. And research shows that parents who stay closer, less risk-taking by 15 and 16-year-olds. The people around a teenager at 15 and 16 make a real difference in reducing risk-taking. Positive peers are a real buffer against stress and risk-taking at this time, as are a close relationship with their parents, who are able to hear their difficulties, not be judgmental, but be open to hearing what's going on and helping them sort out their problems. Next. At 17 and 18, their executive decision-making skills really develop, and they become much smarter on IQ tests and in other ways. So at 17 and 18, there's a lot of intellectual development, a lot of awareness happening about what is their future going to be like, a lot of future focus. And there's a lot of stress and pressure on 18-year-olds because generally they're graduating from high school. It may seem like a lovely thing to have happen and then you're going off to university. But for a lot of 18-year-olds, they're overwhelmed with leaving their friends, leaving the safe environment of their school and going out into the larger world. And they need to know that there are people there that are supporting them, caring about them, and confident that they will be able to make the right decisions. Next. Thank you. So that gives us perhaps more time for questions. I just want to say maybe a final word about it, and about, well, not a final word, but sort of a closing comment, that we don't do this to put a lot of expectations on parents, a lot more expectations, but to remove the idea that youth, once they're a certain age, 15, 16, 17, parents really don't have any say. Our society is somehow kind of disempowering parents. Of course, they still live with you. You still have a lot of negotiating power if that's what you want to think you have. But actually, the biggest and greatest of all powers is your connection and your love with them. And when they feel that you care about them and you tell them that I'm always having your best interest as number one in my heart, that means a lot to them. And if they don't believe that, then we can work to change that. We can help them see and demonstrate ourselves how much we care about them. As that connection is close, we'll have less problems and they'll have less problems.
Okay. Thank you, Gordon. I do have some questions here, and I encourage anybody who is out there to also add any questions of theirs into the chat box. So I'll start with the first question. The first question is, can you please ask Mr. Naylor how you help teens when you know they're hanging out with the wrong crowd? You're sure they're hanging out with the wrong crowd.
That's probably one of the most difficult things with parents, trying to figure out how to do this. And so it's a very good question. And I think one thing I will always say is that every case on its own merit. So you really have to look at the situation. I think I mentioned earlier that it's a good idea to have some discussions that are more general with our youth at earlier stages. The earlier, the better. And continuing on, like, what is a true friend? Let's look at this concept of true friendship. What would I expect from a true friend? What would you expect from a true friend? And when we establish in a principled way what a true friend is like and what they'd be like, then we can say, well, why don't we look at our friends now? I'll look at my friends, you look at your friends. Do we think that they're measuring up to these standards? Are the standards unrealistic, or is this a risky situation? If we have a friend that engages in a lot of risky behaviors, sometimes that creates a lot of psychological pressure on us. So openly discussing that, like, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like your friends were kind of pushing you to do something that you didn't want to do? And is that friendship? Or is that allowing a person to be how they'd like to be? So you want to actually increase their awareness of what's going on in the dynamics in these relationships. Because if their awareness is being increased, then they're going to gain some insight into why perhaps this is not the best friendship. Do we like to be in a situation where we always feel like we're under pressure? We're being pressured by our friends? So we can talk about psychological pressure as something that's very problematic in a relationship. These are not friends that you want to feel you can be with and be comfortable and be able to share your views without having to hide what you really think and who you are. So I would say, again, we have to have these conversations. If we really think, depending on the age of the youth, that these particular people are difficult, we could tell them that, you know, perhaps you have to limit the amount of time you're with them. And because I'm just worried about it. Or perhaps you can figure out a way to make me feel safe, because what I'm seeing is making me really scared. And when I get scared, I probably get angry, and then we'll get out of control. So let's just have a real chat about what's going on here. The more risky it is, the more problematic it is, the more I think we have to talk frankly and honestly, and perhaps urgently.
So we have another friend question. This was written earlier, and it says, I asked my son something similar to what you had said. What does a friend look like? I was asking, and in a very nice way, in a good moment one morning. He looked at me and said, Mom, please get off my back. In case you haven't noticed, no one is breaking the door down to be my buddy. I'm lucky to be invited at all. I don't even get to pick and choose. You're talking about who I should pick and choose. I don't even hardly have a friend. I guess if you would just, I know you're saying you want me to be happy, but the constant questions, you're constantly asking me questions. It just hurts. How are you? Are you okay? Are you happy? I'm not trying to bug you. I just want you to be happy.
Well, that's pretty intense. I'm glad you were able to share that so openly. And I think what I'd say is I would probably first try to identify with the feelings that the person's having just by saying, well, that's pretty overwhelming. That's pretty distressing. So I understand why my questions are disturbing. I'm sorry, that wasn't my intention. So always agree with their point of view at that stage, because there is real truth to what they're saying. And, make clear that you weren't discussing this because you wanted to do anything negative, but you were just trying to really help them and you understand about friendship. Then I would probably move from that. Sorry?
She's adding that it breaks her heart, like it broke her heart. She felt broken heart to hear her son in pain.
Yeah, so that's where our own, we have to be able to put aside our own fears and believe in him. And when I say that, what I mean is tell him that this breaks my heart to hear that, this is happening to you. Because you're deserving of, the best quality friendship. You're a really good person. And, the fact that social circumstances are so bad right now that people treat each other like this is really awful and disgusting. But it's also temporary. And I know that, there's going to be brighter days than these ones. And I have absolute confidence that you don't have to see yourself as a commodity. You have to see yourself as a very, very valuable person that's going to make a significant contribution. So it's a time when you feel the pain, you talk about what it means, but you also give confidence to that youth that this is a temporary situation and that there's going to be real friends and true friends that they're going to make in the future. And that perhaps right now, they aren't in a situation where that's the case. But maybe we can figure out how to get in some better situations so that true friends could show up, or friends that are real. Because you shouldn't have to feel desperate, and you shouldn't have to feel that you just accept anything that comes along, because you're better than that. And we can figure out a way.
So just from my personal understanding of what you're saying, Mr. Naylor, is that if your child feels they do not have friends, because I think a lot of parents experience that at different points, that they pine for their children, in that their children may or may not be popular or have friends. And there's so much emphasis on celebrity, popularity, everything in our society. When your child isn't popular or doesn't have a lot of friends, you're saying encourage them and give them hope that in the future that will happen for them.
Yes,
is that right?
and that the situation is temporary, number one. Number two, you're not as distressed that they don't have friends as you are that somehow they're being made to feel that they should just accept any kind of friend because there's more value in them. And and you really take this very seriously, and you're going to figure out how to get them in a better environment or some better environments where the chances of finding a good friend are greater. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we can get into a different environment so you're not so limited by who's around you, and you will be able to find some true friends. If there aren't any here, then you're right. You shouldn't have to be in this situation. And I certainly shouldn't be asking you to find better people when there isn't any in this situation right now. I trust your judgment. Let's look somewhere else. Let's figure out how to change this. So you're teaching them problem solving. You're teaching them not that they have to just put up with however anybody treats them. Those two, that second one in particular, is really important. You do not have to do that.
Okay. Then we have another question that kind of goes into the same kind of thing. It says, what should we do to show a higher level of understanding? And how do we do that? How do we show a higher level of understanding? And I think that even in that case example was, this is a separate question from a separate individual, but I do think that case example does sort of lead into that you have this problem that also hurts you to see your child in pain or whatever. But anyway, however that applies.
Yeah, I think in terms of, it's not a technique. I don't like the idea of techniques when it comes to relationships, but it has to do with kind of what Tia is talking about when she talks about collecting. You know, somehow we have to establish a heart-to-heart connection. And that, to me, is best done when whatever their perceptions are, you can find a way to agree with that. Because from their point of view, it is real what they're seeing. The problem is you don't have to accept the constrictions that their real assessment is. So the real situation about that last situation is that he perceives or she perceives that there are no good friends. That could be absolutely true.
Invited.
Pardon?
He perceives that he's not being invited or he's not being included, that nobody wants to be his friend. So he therefore doesn't even have a choice to choose good or bad because there's just no friends.
Yes, which would mean to me, it means the same thing. There's no people that are good enough to want to be friends with a good person. So the fact that he can't choose is because he's not in a circle where people have learned to be friendly or thoughtful or caring or thinking about that person. So I need to get them in a place where some people will show up, you know? Like we can't keep kids in a place where nobody shows up. Somebody has to show up in their life, just like a parent shows up in their life. The children have to show up in their life. His friends have to show up. And if there aren't any, then we have to change things. Now, I might have to ask him, well, you know, is there anyone that's good in your group that you'd like to be friends with? And if that's the case, then when I said teaching friendship skills, then how do we cultivate that friendship? So, you know, we're getting a bit away from the question about understanding, but we're not in another way. What we have to demonstrate is that we understand the situation. When a youth, but we also show that we think it's complex. However, complex things get broken down into simple steps. So if I can't make a friend out of this group, the first question is there a friend? Is there anyone? Is there a couple of people that might make good friends here? And if he identifies them or she identifies them, then what might be some steps we could take to perhaps make friendship take place or that they could take? So we are problem solving. We're teaching, okay, yes, it's a terrible thing that that's the situation, but no, you don't have to accept just whatever's going on. And I understand that it's painful, but I believe that you're going to be able to make good friends, or at least some good friends. So, you know, the way we show understanding is to be empathetic, number one, to really help them see that we feel what they're feeling. And then the second step is now that they're sure about that, then now we problem solve. And I'm not saying I have all the answers to the problem, but you and me together can put our heads together. You can tell me if I'm making stupid suggestions, because I really want to help and I don't know the situation like you do. So let's explore. And better still, why don't you make some suggestion? Or let's figure this out together. Or maybe we need to get someone else who's good at making friends that you think might be able to help. So what we're trying to demonstrate here is not that we have the answers, but we do understand, and there are ways to solve the most complex problems. They may not change completely and suddenly, but little by little.
So what is exactly this question? What should we do to show a high level of understanding? So we don't have to use that example. Let's just talk about it in general. What are some examples of a high level of understanding? What I heard you say is to say I understand, but also offer to explore. How else can we show a high level of understanding?
I honestly believe it's by questioning and labeling. Okay, so I might ask a question like, you're really, really stressed about this. And I can see that's really upsetting. You know, is that how you're feeling? Don't ever tell people how they're feeling. Always ask how they're feeling. It seems like you're really distressed. Is that how you're feeling? And then if they confirm, yes, I'm very distressed, then say, you know, when you are distressed, because that's the label now, right? When you are distressed, what helps? You know, what actually helps? Is there anything that can be done to help? You know, sometimes we just want to feel it. I'm not trying to rush you out of the feeling, but, you know, what are the ways that you have been able to de-stress in the past? What has been helpful? So how I'm showing understanding by showing that I'm willing to feel what they're feeling, and I'm willing to work with them little by little to alleviate the suffering and become engaged with them, care about what's happening. When we say stay close, show understanding, it means you're present. You don't just you know, ask them at the end of the day at dinner, how was your day? And that's it. Because they know if they say good or bad, it's a one-word answer or one-sentence answer, and you don't explore anymore, and nobody cares beyond that. But what about intuition? Women are stronger at intuition than men, but generally speaking. But if that's the case, then, you know, like I remember my wife would say to me, your daughter, this daughter, really needs you to talk to her about how she's feeling. And I'd be like, really? She does? I would have missed it. But she'd say, yes, she needs to talk to you about something. You should go and have a conversation with her. And that's all I needed to go and say, I really want to know how you're really feeling, you know? And explore a little deeper, not just, hi, how are you, I'm fine. These are just forms we have of engaging with each other, which are okay. But it's got to be deeper than that. It's got to be like, I really, really hear you and want to talk to you at a deeper level. And usually they will respond to that. Or maybe they don't want to. Maybe they feel there's too much pain. Okay, if you're feeling too much pain, then, you know, let's set a time in the future we're going to talk about it. Right now, maybe it's just too much. But then I come back. I show them I come back. Because I'm coming back because, you know, something's going on here. I need you to tell me. Sometimes it can be so distressing that it could take a couple of days before it actually comes out and they want to talk about it. Try to create circumstances where they could talk about it. Try to help them know that you'll always love them no matter what you hear. And try to show them that you're not going to lose your mind when they tell you something, because they don't want to tell you if they're afraid of your reaction. So assure them about you being calm, you being able to listen. Remove every obstacle, make them as comfortable as possible to be able to talk about what they need to talk about. But also tell them you're aware that they need to talk.
Thank you. So I have one father, I think we have time for this question. I have one father, because we started late, one father who has written, I'm struggling now with my challenges. After hearing what you've said, I realize they're my challenges. I spend quite a bit of time saying to my son, very similar to what my parents said to me, I want you to think about where you're heading. Are you going in the wrong direction? My son seems to hate questions. I remember my father saying, you're going to break your mother's heart. was always a forewarning to be careful, beware. And I know now as an adult, of course, it was out of love. And maybe I've tried to do some of that with my own son. This challenge that you're giving us tonight is, instead of questioning them, the kinds of questions I understand you're talking about are just questions in terms of how can I help, rather than what are you doing? Be careful, you're going in the wrong way. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's very perceptive what you're saying. And I feel like, when somebody asks you a question, you already know if they trust you. And if I ask you a question with an attitude of trust, like I have confidence that you're going to be able to answer this question, and I ask you that question with respect, and that you have a lot of complexity in your life. And I'm not trying to minimize that, but I really need, to understand what's going on here. I'm going to get quite a different answer. I've now paved the way for you to tell me the truth about things, and for you to have confidence that I will still respect you. I respected you before I knew. I'm going to respect you after. I feel like, if we can really be genuine, then we're going to have a very good relationship. But if I ask you a question in a way that I expect you to fail, or you might fail, or I even threaten you that you will fail, then you're going to answer me very defensively. You're not going to feel that you could be honest with me. It's kind of like we keep the pattern that we might have had with kids. Like, as a principal of a school, I never ask a kid something that I already know the answer to. It's just a rule. Like, if you come into my office and I'm checking out whether you did something, and I already know you did it, I will never ask you if you did it. And if you try to tell me you didn't do it, I'm going to say, we're not starting there. Don't be wasting my time. We're already, I don't insult you by saying, did you do it? You don't insult me by pretending you didn't. We're just starting here and we're going forward. So now how are we going to deal with this? Now, I won't do that if I don't know for sure. But if I do know, I don't ask. It's like saying to a child, did you do that? When you know they did it. So why are you asking that question? Are you trying to trap them or catch them? No, I shouldn't be doing that. I wouldn't do that to another adult. I shouldn't do that to anyone. So instead I say, I know you did this. I want to understand what you were thinking about. I don't ask them why. I never ask why. Why is always because. You want to say, what were you thinking about? What thoughts were going through your mind when this happened? And then I'm going to say, because this wasn't like you. This isn't who you are. So this is way out of character, and I need to understand what's going on that would cause you to do this thing, because I want to understand, because I believe you have a good future. You're a smart kid. You're my son. You're my daughter. I have to see what's happening. But you've got to have the attitude that you know that they're good, and that if you don't know that they're good, who's going to know that they're good? It doesn't mean they don't make mistakes, and it doesn't mean they won't do wrong things, but you know that they're good. And so the questions will be asked like that. Knowing that you're good, this is something I'm trying to understand. Like, such a good person, how are they not having friends? Like, something is messed up here. Either the place is messed up, people are messed up, but I need to understand. See, they're going to talk to me. But when I ask questions, when kids say they don't want to ask questions, why are you always asking questions? There's two things about questions. One is the content and the form. We ask questions in form, which is, why are you doing that? But what's the content of that? The content really is something different. It's more like, I know you're doing these wrong things all the time, Johnny. So I'm just playing with you by asking this question. That's the real content of the question. And the kid knows the real content. Let me assure you, they know when you're asking a genuine question or you're actually dumping a load of judgment on them, just like If your boss is going to put you in that position, you know right away that you're done for. So you cannot ask questions that way if you want to have good communication, or you won't have good communication. They'll be hiding things from you. I often refer to my wife, but one thing I knew about my wife is that they could talk to her about everything and anything, no matter what. She would not show them that she was judging them. They would never think that they should do wrong things as a result of that. And she would always talk about the right course of action, but she would not, make them feel like they were less than something because they did something wrong.